This is Michael Woodward, and this is Season 3, Episode 248 of Jumblethink.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Jumblethink, where we interview amazing entrepreneurs about their journey of turning dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we're going to share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. On today's show, we're talking about how to use micro-experiments to innovate in your business. Whether you're a new listener or a longtime fan, you can catch every episode of Jumblethink wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're a fan of Apple Podcasts, super easy, head on over to jumblethink.com/iTunes. And for Spotify, jumblethink.com/Spotify. Take you right to the app, right to where you can subscribe. So do that right now. Head on over wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe to Jumblethink. Now let's jump into today's episode. Hey there, welcome to Jumblethink. My name's Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have a fun show lined up for you today talking about how to use micro-experiments to innovate in your business. We're going to get to that in a minute. Before we do, we want to thank some people that make today's show possible, our sponsors. So we want to thank OpportunityInChina.com. Whether you want to learn or teach abroad, they are your connection to educational opportunities around the world. Check them out, OpportunityInChina.com. We also want to thank our friends over at Penji. Penji is your unlimited graphic design service at one low monthly fee. They're doing great stuff. We love working with them. You can check them out at penji.com. And when you head on over there as a listener of Jumblethink, use the code JUMBLE, Jumble, to get 15% off your first month. All right, so we are talking about micro-experiments in today's episode, specifically how to use micro-experiments to innovate in your business. For a while now, we've been talking about micro-experiments. We basically took the scientific method and applied it to entrepreneurship. How do you use experiments to rapidly innovate or grow in your business? And we've talked about micro-experiments quite a bit throughout the last year, really. Today, we're going to give you some real deep level how you can actually use them. Some examples of how to use micro-experiments in your business or in your entrepreneurial endeavors, or if you're just wanting to click something off, check something off of your bucket list, how you can use micro-experiments in your personal life also. Before we get rolling on that, I want to say I hope you're enjoying your summer. Summer's a great time to get out and do incredible things. It's great weather for most places. Unless you're like in the Northeast or Southeast, then it's hot and humid, and there are people that love that. I don't know why they do. I don't, but if you're there and you love it, more power to you. It's a great time to get out there and really go out and experiment on your ideas, your dreams. So as we talk today in today's show about micro-experiments, think about how you can utilize vacation time, how you can utilize the great weather outside, how you can utilize having the freedom to not have kids in school. Sometimes that's a good thing where you can have more freedom. Sometimes you have to spend more time with the kids. Either way, it's an awesome thing in summer. Well, summer is a great time to use micro-experiments. So today's episode, we're talking about that and giving you some real world tools to help you in this process. I first want to take a moment and talk about innovation versus inventing. Both are powerful tools. Both are great tools for your journey of entrepreneurship, for idea making, for dreaming. But they are different. And I think a lot of businesses think they're inventing or they're thinking they're innovating, but they're actually doing the other. So when we talk about using micro-experiments to innovate in your business, it's really important that we lay a foundation for what innovation looks like. Now, the two really do cross, and you may invent in one space and then innovate on that invention. You may be innovating in a space and have to invent something to get to the next iteration, the next generation that didn't exist before. So what is inventing? Inventing is to create or design something that has not existed before, to be the originator of. On the flip side, innovation, to innovate, is to make changes in something established, especially by introducing new methods, ideas, or products. Innovation is the evolution of an idea. It's an evolution of an invention or an idea that's already been shared, and you're bringing new, fresh life into it, where inventing is creating a space that didn't exist before. Some people say, well, isn't it inventing if you're taking an innovation and creating something new from it? That gets into a gray area, and I don't really think that's true invention. Great example of this is that Apple released a phone, killer phone. That was an invention. It was a new space. Some people will say that's an innovation because the phone already existed, cell phones existed, the internet existed, but what they did is they invented a new space where it brought everything together, and no one had thought about doing that before, or at least real publicly talked about that, and no one had really executed to say, what if we brought a phone? What if we brought our music? What if we brought the internet? What if we brought in social media? What if we brought in all these different kinds of apps? What if we bring our maps from paper into this? And so they invented a new space. Since then, Apple, Samsung, Google have innovated in that space to evolve that phone to do more and more and more. The space has been invented that they brought everything together and they invented that space. Now it's innovating in that space. They aren't doing anything truly new. They're just taking and evolving that. And there's nothing wrong with either invention or innovation. Another great example is the Wright brothers invented the plane. Somebody else invented jet technology. And then they innovated by bringing the two together. Jets were used for things outside of planes, and primary purpose was to help propulsion of planes. And so adding that technology and bringing it together was the innovation, whereas inventing the plane and inventing jet technology was the invention. Then they innovated by bringing it together. Now they're doing things to planes to innovate in that space. They're not really changing the technology itself. They're just innovating and evolving it to be more efficient, more green, to get better mileage, to use less gas, to be more cost-effective when it comes to how the technology actually works and how it can be maintained. So that's all innovation versus inventing. As we kind of begin to pivot into the innovation space of using micro experiments, and you can use micro experiments to invent also. We're just specifically focused on innovation today. I want to make it clear that you know that neither is good or bad. They're just different. And for different seasons of businesses, for different types of entrepreneurs or business owners, they're going to be more focused on innovation or inventing. You don't see a lot of places that are creators of inventing that are also then really masters in innovation, and vice versa. You don't see a lot of innovators that are really inventors, although there are few out there that do that and do it well. They're just different. And to say, hey, I'm innovating in this space and I'm better than the inventor would be foolish. And to say, hey, I'm inventing, but I'm not innovating, and so I'm better, that would be foolish too. So innovation and invention, inventors are so significant. Both are massively important into the evolution of business as we do it, as the creation of new products and services and messages. Both are critical, and you must have them both. So while we focus on innovation, while we focus on innovators, we are not saying that inventors and the value of inventing is bad. We're just saying it's different. We'll probably do another episode in the future where we talk about invention and how that's a little bit different and how you can use micro experiments for that. So why do we need to innovate in our business? If you're a business owner, if you're an entrepreneur, even if you're a dreamer or an idea maker, you know that you are not perfect right off of day one for your business or for the innovation that you're creating. It is a process, and so we need to innovate for many reasons. We may need to innovate to get better and create a better product off our initial idea. You go, we innovated in this space and it was awesome, but maybe we can do better quality control. Maybe you need to innovate to create a stronger team. Maybe you need to innovate to move forward. But one of the best reasons is that when you become stagnant, people get less engaged with your product, services, or message. So when they get bored with it, they'll move on. And by innovating in that space, you're going to keep the product, you're going to keep the message, you're going to keep the service fresh and new and living. And so you need to innovate so that you are constantly staying on the pulse of your team, staying on the pulse of your customer or your target audience. If you're sharing a message, you need to be innovating because they're going to be more likely to stay along for the ride if the product, if the service, if the message stays fresh. So what are the places where we can innovate in our business? I'm going to give you a few examples. If you spent some time thinking about your business, if you thought about your dreams and ideas, you would find all kinds of places to innovate. I'm going to share an exercise real quick that you can do. It comes from James Altucher. We're hoping to have him on the show very soon, working out those details. What's cool about one of James's philosophies is he has this philosophy of list of 10, where you come up with an overarching theme. Let's talk about maybe movie ideas. Then you create a list of 10 potential ideas off that core idea. And then you evolve and innovate in that space. And you can say, these are good ideas, these are bad ideas, let's move forward to it. So you could just sit down with, how can I innovate in my business? How can I innovate in my life? How can I innovate on my products? How can I innovate in a specific dream or idea that I want to accomplish? And you can write a list down. And I would recommend doing that because for you, the list I give here on how you can innovate in your business might fit. It might fit for your life. It might fit for other things you're doing, but it may not. And so for you, innovation may look different. I just want to start making you think about the things you're doing so that you can start really being massively powerful in the creation of innovative ideas. So here are a few of my suggestions for you to start the process of helping you think through this and how you can innovate in your business. Area number 1 is customer service. And this is an area that most businesses forget about, becomes stagnant, and whether you're offering a product or service or a message, they're not really engaging. You're not really engaging well with your customers. And a customer could be simply someone that's buying into the message you're sharing. So if you're a thought leader, you still have customers and you still need to connect with them. So how can you innovate in this? So let's say you start out a small business and you go, hey, I want to create the best widget in the world. So you create the best widget ever and you launch it out to the world and you go, hey, buy my best widget. And they go, this is awesome. This widget works for X, Y, and Z. It is perfect. But then they start using it in real world and they come in and say, hey, we think there's a better solution here. We think that you can make this better. But you don't hear from them because you don't have good practices in place to help them connect with you. They go to your website, they find an email address, they email you, but you don't have anyone managing it. So now all of a sudden you have a great product that could be better, that people want to engage with, and their voice isn't being heard. So you can innovate by creating better structures of communication with customer service. So how do you do that? So maybe step number 1 is you go, well, we have an email, no one answers it. So you put an employee or yourself answering those emails. Sometimes you take solutions from that and say, hey, let's apply this to our best widget ever and have a better widget ever. Maybe you respond to them and support them in the questions that they have, but that customer service all of a sudden is better. And then you go, hey, now we have 1 million people using our products and we need to do a better job of staying in touch. You bring on more people, but that simple one email box is getting cluttered. So now you move into a content relationship management tool or software, CMS, and you allow them to log in with their own profile, put support tickets in there, questions in there, comments, suggestions. Now your customer service area has innovated. You went from an email box that no one answered to an email box people answered to a solution where people can come in and submit tickets and see what other people are involved with the forum and everything like that. So all of a sudden you're increasing that customer service and you're innovating the strategies, the systems behind it to make it better, and you're giving a better experience. So that's one area of innovation that a lot of businesses forget. Another area that's more obvious would be new products, services, or messages. So you may have a product and it might be the best widget ever, but then you have an idea and you go, you know what would make the best widget ever better? If it had a sister product that integrated with this widget. And you're innovating in that space saying, well, let's bring another product from our old product into our system. Now, they are sister products. They're very similar. Maybe it's going from a user who is a consumer, a customer at a very residential level. Maybe the widget is for a lawn care product. And now you're innovating a corporate level, going from consumer to business solution. And so you're innovating that product. You're taking from the old and then you're making a new product, but it's an evolution of that product. Or maybe you look at your competitors and go, our best widget's awesome, but this company out here is doing X, Y, and Z. Now, you don't want to copy them necessarily, but you could learn from them and evolve and innovate your product to grow into a better product through the process of discovery, what could be from what already is. So you could look at the old as inspiration to innovate to a new, and that would be an innovation process. You could look at competitors to innovate from what you have into a new space. You could innovate in your service offerings or your message to say, hey, our message about being the best coach in the world is about coaches who work in the financial industry. And you go, that's awesome. But you know what else? Maybe it's the insurance industry, and you innovate your products and services from one market to another. And so you're taking a product and applying it from one people group, your financial planners, your coaches, and you're applying it to another one, your insurance industry. And so now you have relatively the same product, but you've evolved and innovated it to make it a better product for different audiences. You could also look at your internal systems. This is one of the areas that I think businesses do very poorly. Their team structure, when you grow your business, will change. And when it changes, you have to evolve or innovate in your internal systems, whether that's a payroll system, whether that's project management, whether that's your system of hierarchy within the team, whether that is how you deal with customer relations and project onboarding or product creation, or as you grow, your old manufacturer might not be able to manage the new amount of volume you have to do. And so you may need to innovate how you're creating and bringing it in-house or outsourcing it as you get bigger. These are all innovations in your business that are internal systems that help make you healthy as a business. And many businesses forget these. They forget that internal systems are an innovative space within their business. They're so focused on customers, products, services, and messages that they forget what are the tools in the back end that create a healthy environment for what we are innovating on and creating. So that's another area within your business. Now, if you are a message person, a way that you could innovate in your business is simply by moving from level 1, an entry level into innovation strategies, into level 2, a master's level of innovating business strategies for businesses. And by growing, you are morphing your message. You're involved in innovating your message to be much more robust and strong, but you're still at the core an innovation specialist. Your message could be all about how to influence people on Instagram. And instead of going from the thought leader standpoint, you innovate in your business and say, we're going to help corporations to tell their story through Instagram. And so that would be an innovation on your messaging. So there are all kinds of ways that you can innovate in your business, both internally, externally, with how you talk to your customers, how you talk to your team, with the systems there, with the products that you offer, with the messages and services that you offer. These are all places that you can innovate and grow. And that's why I said, pull out that pen and paper and do a list of 10, do a list of 20, do a list of 40, and think about areas in your business that might be pain points, or think about products that aren't reaching their full potential that you could evolve into a better product. And these are all areas that you could innovate, grow, and develop into a stronger business, a stronger idea, a stronger dream. Maybe it's a bucket list item, and you innovate that dream into something you never knew existed. So you may go, my dream is to go to Europe, and then you innovate on that idea, and you go, well, I'd like to go to Europe, but I'd really like to see the castles of Germany, and I'd really like to see the Celtic history of Ireland, and I'd really like to see Italy and the wine culture, or whatever that is for you. And you're innovating the initial dream, and you're refining that, which leads me to the last area in business that you can really innovate. And that is refinement and narrowing the product and service. You may create a product, service, or message that's very broad. And as you get deeper into it, you refine that to be more narrow. That's an innovation. And the more focused you can be, the more you can innovate in that space, the better you can offer complete and full and perfect solutions for your niche customer. Now, I'm a generalist on this podcast. We have a lot of different people from random circles on as guests. We talk about different topics around business and idea formation and innovation. We're a generalist podcast, but we come back to our core, which is the story of ideas. And so for us, we innovate throughout the year. How can we do a better job of telling the story of the ideas of entrepreneurs that are on this show? How can we do a better job of bringing in the story of dreams and ideas into the show? How can we format things differently? What questions can we be asking? These are all innovations. And if you listen to season 1 of the podcast and of the radio show, you will actually hear vast differences in the structure and format and the flow and the meter of how things move throughout the show. We're continually growing and evolving that so we can become better at what we are doing. That is an innovation within our podcast and our show. Our approach on how we reach out to guests, our approach on how we reach out to sponsors. We're innovating and growing and learning through that process and making a stronger offering of what we do for the specific audiences we're trying to reach. Now, in innovation and in inventing, it is overwhelming sometimes to think that, hey, I've got to do this massive shift. And before we wrap up this segment, I wanted to talk about micro versus macro innovation. As a business, there are going to be areas in which you have to get very detailed, and they're small, subtle changes. A great example of a micro innovation, I was sitting down a couple years ago with some of the lead developers at Netflix, and they were talking millionths of a second difference on usability for their customers. That's the micro experiments that they were innovating in their business to create a better experience by millionths of seconds. You get enough of those add up to lots of changes in experience for that end user. So they were focused on the nitty-gritty micro, and for you and your business, that may be where you need to be. It's a great place to be. It seems a lot more tangible and easy to do. I just want to take this one area of my business and make it better. So small micro innovation is a great tool, and I would recommend that that's where you start with. And as you get better at the process of micro experiments, maybe you look at macro innovations where you're going, what's the big picture innovation for the business, the message, the service we're doing? And you make huge leaps from where you are to where you're going. So all that to say, small changes in innovation make big changes over time. Macro innovations make big changes in the immediate. Don't feel like you have to start with macro innovation. That's why we call it micro experiments. Micro experiments because they're easier to make tangible in the process of turning those dreams and ideas into reality. In a moment, we're going to be back. We're going to go deeper into this topic, and we're going to get into what a micro experiment is, how it looks, and then in our final segment today, we're going to be talking about how to apply the micro experiment process to your own business. We'll be right back. Today's show is sponsored by our friends over at OpportunityInChina.com. Here's a little bit more about them. Have you been looking for a way to change your career or social prospects? Do you see the world around you changing and haven't quite figured out what path you should take? You are not alone in seeking opportunity. Visit OpportunityInChina.com for access to scholarships to attend university in China, or if you have a bachelor's degree already, OpportunityInChina.com provides access to jobs in the educational sector all across China. Now, working in China is not only often well paid, but it will place you among 1/5 of the world's population, boosting your social network, bringing you more deeply into the story of globalization, and opening up doors you never knew existed. Seize your opportunity now. Visit their website for more information at OpportunityInChina.com. We also want to thank our friends over at Penji for sponsoring today's show. Penji helps startups, agencies, and marketing teams achieve more with unlimited graphic design support at one flat monthly rate. Their easy-to-use online platform pairs you with a professional designer and lets you create as many design projects as you want. Think of it as your monthly subscription to top-notch design. No contracts, no hourly billing, just fast, simple, and affordable graphic design for all of your needs. Use the code JUMBLE, Jumble, to get 15% off your first month when you visit Penji, PENJI.com. By the way, I've been using these guys for a few months now on internal projects here at JumbleThink, logos, some pamphlets and flyers that we use when we send out to potential customers and clients. Really great stuff. Super happy with their work. So go check them out and get that 15% off when you use the code JUMBLE at Penji.com. Now let's jump back into today's conversation as we go deeper into this concept of micro experiments. We are back talking about how to use micro experiments to innovate in your business. That's today's topic. Super excited to be talking about it. Now, in this segment, we are going to get into the dirt, if you will, of micro experiments and our philosophy around micro experiments. Micro experiments came from my desire to have a clear step process for businesses, for idea makers, for innovators to come in and say, I have big ideas, I have dreams, but I don't know how to make them a reality. I'm afraid because they're too big and they just overwhelm me. I don't have the finances or resources to make them a reality. And for a lot of businesses, those obstacles are real, whether it's fear, whether it's financial, whether it's time even. Those are three of the biggest ones we hear from people we talk to all the time. They say, I have a great idea, I have a great dream, but I don't have the resources to make it happen, whatever it is. So I wanted to prove that you can do a lot with a little, whether it's a little on your finances, a little bit of risk, a little bit of time, a little bit of energy, that a little can go a far way in the process of turning those dreams and ideas into reality. And this is especially true for businesses and for entrepreneurs. You want to leverage the resources you have and you want to steward them well. So if you have a lot of money from your business, you still want to be a good steward of the money you have to reinvest into research and development of your products and services or message. But you also want to be able to cut your loss before it becomes a big loss in that process. Micro experiments allow you to do that. They allow you to gauge quickly through the process of innovation if you're on the right path or if the idea is something you really want to invest in. So for me and for JumbleThink, I stepped back and I said, well, what can we create that would be a simple process that entrepreneurs, that business owners, that anyone could take and apply to their journey and say, hey, I'm willing to take a small step. I'm willing to invest a little bit of money. I'm willing to go into the unknown here or try something and see where it goes. I remember talking to a specific guest on the podcast. I won't mention who it is, but it was about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now. And they were talking about the process of what they were doing in a specific industry and some of the struggles and fears and obligations that they were trying to meet with their business as they were growing and evolving and really setting a foundation for the future. I felt really sad for them because it felt like they weren't sure about a lot. And they weren't committed because they were filled with fear in the new venture that they were trying to push into with the business. That's part of the reason why we ask every guest, what's one thing that you're struggling with in your business? Because we hear the stories of success. We hear the stories of breakthrough. We hear the stories of mega millionaires out of a simple idea or dream. The reality is that all of those businesses, there are pain points still. And so whether they're massively successful or just trying to get through till the next day, there are things that they're encountering. And for me to hear a guy who was super successful be struggling in the future, I went to the drawing boards and said, what can I create that would have value to all levels of entrepreneurship, all levels of business formation, all levels of just turning dreams and ideas into reality? And over the course of a couple weeks, I started to create a process called the micro experiment. We actually created a guide called the Dreamer's Guide to Micro Experiments. And probably throughout the rest of this year, I'll be working on finishing up a book all about micro experiments on how you can use it. So this is something that's dear to my heart because I want people to succeed. I want their dreams and ideas to succeed. I want them to flourish and not be in famine. I want them to do well. And so I created the Dreamer's Guide to Micro Experiments to help people who are willing to step into the unknown, to take the unconventional journey, to make their dreams and ideas a reality easier to do. Now, I wish I could say that on day one we had it perfect. We are probably a year and a half now into micro experiments. This is an evolution. We are evolving how these work, learning from the feedback from people like you listening, saying, hey, this worked for me. Hey, I'm struggling here, tuning that. But for now, we have a 5-step process. And loosely, it's based on the scientific principle, the scientific method of research and development and of running experiments. And so I looked at it and said, what if we took those baselines and said, how does that apply to entrepreneurship? How does the scientific process apply to business? How does it apply to bucket list items for that matter? And we created our own 5 steps to help you on this process. So what are the 5 steps? Well, step number 1, form a question or goal. What do you want to learn or achieve in this micro experiment? Ask a clear question. What is the goal you want to reach? You want to set up questions and goals and have a destination that you're trying to get to. Now, you don't want to introduce bias into what you're creating here. We are all filled with bias. We did a whole episode about bias. And our presupposition, our experience on life informs the decisions and perceptions we have for the future. Some people call that mindset. And so for you, don't taint the experiment by expectations, but step back a step further than that. Say, I would really like to know, if I do this, what is the outcome? Or if it's a goal, you may go, I want to take this product and get to this specific place. But keep it simple. Micro experiments are about quick, easy, and fun. The more fun, quick, and easy you make it, the more successful they are going to be, the more the process is going to be engaging, and you're going to get there better. So form that question or goal you're trying to get there. Step number 2, set a time limit. Remember, this is a micro experiment, so set a short time limit. It could be as simple as, I'm going to spend the next hour working on this to see if this will work. It could be a day, it could be a weekend, it could be a week, it could be a month. But when you start pushing beyond that, I would say you're going too far out. Maybe 6 months. But keep the experiment short, simple, and easy. Remember, this is an experiment. This isn't a true pivot in your business. This is a trial and error. This is a process of discovery and learning. Keep it short as possible. This will help you stay focused. It will help you stay on task. It will help you stay engaged. It will help you stay excited. So think about that dream and idea and set a time limit to it. If you reach that time limit and you haven't achieved it, we're going to get to the final step, which is continuation of that. But if you do get there, or if you get there early, you're going to have some steps later to do too. So you don't have to hit the target. And if you hit your target and you're not done, step back and start the process again. If you hit it way before, don't wait till you hit your deadline to start the next micro experiment. This is a lifestyle of micro experiments that apply to entrepreneurship and into business. So step 1, you've formed a question or goal. Step 2, you've set your time limit. Step 3, run the experiment. This is the time to get your hands dirty and have a lot of fun. No matter if you fail or succeed, that's just part of the experiment. So you're not going in to have success. You're going in to learn. You're going in to try. Just keep going in the experiment. And one of the important things throughout this process is documentation. So you're writing down in step 1 the goals and questions you want answered. You're writing down the time limit you have right there. In step 3, you're writing down your experiences in that experiment. So run the experiment. Get in there, do it, and have fun in that. So step 1, form a question or goal. Step 2, set a time limit. Step 3, run the experiment. Step 4, stop and reflect. This is massively significant for micro experiments. Most people, they do something, they set out a goal, they answer that question, and they move on to the next thing. This is bad. Part of the process is learning, and you only learn when you stop and reflect. So in the journey of micro experiments, stop and reflect. What did you learn that worked? What did you learn that didn't work? What did you enjoy about the process? What did you hate about what you were trying to do. Reflect on the experiment and make observations. The deeper you can go, the better your next micro experiment is going to be. So don't rush through this step. Really take stock of what's happening. So why would you do this? Well, if you run an experiment and you find something that works, you're going to push more into that. And that might be your next micro experiment, is evolving that, innovating in that. If it didn't work, you're taking stock of what happened. You're reflecting on what didn't work, and you're trying to figure out, the next time I go into a micro experiment, how can I try this differently to get the outcome I'm looking for? Again, that outcome isn't like, hey, I've got to reach this specific thing. But if you're trying to create a widget and the widget didn't work, well, what didn't work about it? And then go back to another micro experiment to try to make that better. I also talk about, did you enjoy it? And this seems like a silly question, but if you are running a business, if you are being an entrepreneur, enjoyment is part of that process. It might not be the only decision on why you do something or don't do something, and you may have team members that come in and enjoy that process. But if you don't enjoy it, if you hate it, and you don't feel like it's relevant for what you're doing, then maybe it's not an idea, an innovation you should be focused on. If you love it, then maybe it's one that you want to push into more. So it's not a complete benchmark for success there if you enjoy or don't enjoy it, but it is important. So step number 1, again, form a question or goal. Step number 2, set a time limit. Step number 3, run the experiment. Step number 4, stop and reflect. Step number 5, a lot of people do these things and they're done. They check out. Did it. It's off my list. I can move on to another thing. But part of micro experiments is the evolution of an idea, concept, dream, product, service, message, whatever it is for you and what you do. To evolve that, to innovate in what you're doing, you must rinse and repeat. So wash off the old. Take what's good, leave what's bad, learn from it, and continue the process. Go back to step 1. If you succeed the first time, then take the next step. What's the next step in this process? What's the next step in refinement? What's the next innovation? If you failed, adjust and try again, or change direction. If you hated it, maybe find a different micro experiment. But in that process, you're going to rinse and repeat. So let's review this. Step number 1, form a question or goal. Step number 2, set a time limit. Step number 3, run the experiment. Step number 4, stop and reflect. Step number 5, rinse and repeat. I know some of you are listening right now and you're going, okay, that's cool. How can I get a little list of this? Because I don't know if I'm going to remember all of it. If you head on over to jumblethink.com, you should see a little pop-up in your right corner, and it will say, hey, download that form. It's completely free. It's a free guide. We have tons of guides, jumblethink.com/guide. We have guides on micro experiments. We have guides on overcoming the unknown. We have a guide on how to know when you've found your dream. All of these are tools that are completely free for you. So if this micro experiment method sounds really cool and you're ready to take that next step, head on over to jumblethink.com/guide to download that free guide. Again, it's completely free, so go on over and do that. All right, so we've talked about the story behind micro experiments. We've talked about the evolution of them. We've talked about the 5 steps. I've talked about that infographic that you can download for free. Well, that's all good, Mike. I'm glad that you have this philosophy of micro experiments. Some of you are saying that, thinking that. But I want to know how this really applies to me, how this applies to my business. Well, first off, you need to know that you have to have a plan and a strategy to innovate. Trial and error works, but it doesn't always work. And when you have a method, a tried and true method that you can apply to your questions and into the things that you want to do, that method you can work the system. Now, you don't have to follow my system, the micro experiment, the Dreamer's Guide to Micro Experiments to a T. You could use it as a base and evolve it for what works for you. Tune the steps so that they work for you. But I would really encourage you to take that system and apply it to what you're doing. Apply it to the dreams and ideas and the concepts that you're working through. Use it as a baseline for moving your dream into reality as an entrepreneur, or evolving your business to the next level if you're a business owner or an entrepreneur with multiple businesses. It is a tool that you could teach to your team and apply. So we're going to pause right here. We've talked a lot about tons of different things, inventing versus innovation. We've talked about the Dreamer's Guide to Micro Experiments. We've talked about how that applies. We're going to take a break here, and when we come back in a moment, we're going to actually talk a little bit about how micro experiments can work for your business. There is a lot going on at JumbleThink. If you're listening to this on the radio, we have a podcast, especially like episodes like Tuesdays with Walter Stein. There's a lot more in the podcast than what's available to you on the radio. If you're listening on the podcast, there's a lot more that we can do to connect and do this journey of idea formation and innovation and chasing dreams and ideas together. What's the best way to connect? Head on over to jumblethink.com. You can find links to sign up for our newsletter. You can find places where you can drop me a note and just let me know what you think about today's episode or ask a question. It comes right to me. I'm going to answer it. I'd love to start that conversation with you. You're going to find links to some cool events like idea camps. You're going to be able to also see upcoming events that we're going to be a part of. Well, head on over to jumblethink.com and you can find all of that information along with those free guides and much, much more. Our passion here at JumbleThink's simple. We want to see people turn their dreams and ideas into reality. We want them to find their created purpose, to step into the fullness of who they are and really begin the journey of reaching your full potential. So become part of the JumbleThink family. Head on over to jumblethink.com. You'll also find links right on that site to our social channels like Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Let's chase dreams and ideas together. Let's go deep into the process of becoming who we were created to be and living up to our full potential. And let's do it together. So head on over to jumblethink.com and let's connect. Now let's jump back into today's episode as we give you some tips on how you can innovate in your business by using micro experiments.
Appuyez sur le disque, mettez le contact, reposez votre bras et attendez. Restez calme.
We are back and on our final segment as we talk about micro experiments. I hope that you are enjoying today's show. So, I'm teaching about this whole concept of micro experiments, and it came to me, maybe I should share how I use micro experiments in my own life. I'm going to give you a couple examples here, and then we're going to wrap up today's show talking about how you can take it to the next level by using micro experiments to innovate in your own business. So for me, there are lots of micro experiments I do. One of my simplest micro experiments, and one of my favorite to run, is a proof of concept micro experiment. I have lots of ideas. I am your typical entrepreneur who is always dreaming, who always has ideas and concepts I'm working out in my head. I think one of the most recent ones was, would there be interest in a micro root beer, birch beer, sarsaparilla brewery? Would people be interested in that kind of thing? So when I have a new idea and dream, one of the simplest things I do is I step back and say, is there interest in whatever I want to create? If there's interest, maybe there's a possibility for a business. If there's interest, maybe there is a clientele that I could be marketing to before we even launch the product. So for me, I was interested in starting a birch beer, sarsaparilla, root beer company, all those non-alcoholic drinks from ancient years ago, and creating a real craft version of these. There are some companies out there doing that. I love drinking them. I find that process fascinating. And so I said, maybe this is something I can create, and it's probably something that I'll be doing. So I wanted to see how many people would be interested in something like this. So what I did was I picked a really clever name. I think I called it the Birch Barrel. And then what I did is I created a quick and easy Facebook ad and a Google ad, and I ran it for like a week, and I spent like $5. And I wanted to see two things. One, how many people did it reach? Because you're going to get ads based on your interests and that kind of thing. So how many people did it reach? What kind of interest level is out there for this kind of thing? Second thing is, how many people saw it and engaged with it? Maybe they clicked on it. So they now are on our website. Then what I did is I created a little splash page that says, coming soon, we're excited about this idea. If you're excited about it too, here's a little place to sign up for our newsletter. And then what I looked at was what the conversion process was throughout that experiment, this micro experiment. Ran it for a week. So conversion would be how many people saw it. So is there interest in this area in general? Then step 2, area that I was measuring, number 2, is how many people clicked over when they saw the ad. And now I have to make sure that the ad is good, because if it's not good, then people won't click it. But if it's a solid ad and there's enough traffic to that topic, then how many people are clicking on it? And then the third was how many people, when they got to the little splash page, I created a splash page on Squarespace, I think, even just on our website, and how many people are actually interested in signing up to stay up to date. Now, I took all of those stats and I said, okay, let's say we ran it for a week and we had 1,000 people that saw the ad, and then we had 500 that clicked on it, and then we had 100 people that signed up for a newsletter. To me, I would be like, that's a great proof of concept. However, on the flip side, when I ran the micro experiment, if I got the results back like, okay, 1 million people saw it, 10 people clicked on it, 1 person signed up, now I know that there is a problem. And what do I do with that? That's my rinse and repeat. That's my stop and reflect stage. So now, after I've run the experiment, I stopped and I stepped back and I said, was there interest in this this specific space? There was, in my case, in my micro experiment. Did people click over to the website? They did. We got about a 10% sign up. I felt that was pretty good. So to me, that micro experiment said this: your idea is good. There's interest in it. What's the next step? And that leads me to another micro experiment. In this case, it would be starting a little campaign to raise some money to actually fund the idea, and then going out and creating the birch beer and experimenting with different recipes and getting people to like it. Each of those steps is a micro experiment until I've actually built out a business around it. So my micro experiment launches that into where we go for the future. Now, let's say that the experiment didn't turn out as well as I anticipated, which actually didn't happen in this case, but let's say it did. Well, in the stop and reflect stage, I would look back and say, was my ad solid? Well, it was. Was there lots of interest in this area? Yes, there was. Did anyone click? Yeah, we got a good click through. Did people convert? No, they didn't sign up. So at that point, then I have to ask questions like, is our branding? Was it our messaging? Was it simply that we were too early in the process to actually gather that information? So that is an example of a micro experiment where I took a concept, a dream, an idea for a business, the whole concept of starting a craft root beer company, and I tested it out to see what the viability of that business was based on interest. So that is an example of a micro experiment that I've done personally. Now I'm going to give you one more example of a micro experiment that I ran in the last month, actually. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you'll know that we have a specific format with guests. Segment 1 is talking about their origin story, how they get interested in what they're doing, how they start a business with it. Segment 2 is all about what is their area of expertise and talking about their area of expertise. And segment 3 is our rapid fire questions. We pretty much follow that for most episodes when we have a guest. I had a lot of feedback from listeners like you, and they were saying, we love rapid fire questions. So thinking about people loving it, I said, all right, well, why don't we put it right at the front of the episode? And I did that. And I learned 2 things. One, our listenership actually dropped when we did that. So lesson number 1, not a good idea. Lesson number 2 was that having rapid fire questions at the end, and I'm going to open up the veil here a little bit so you get to see the behind the scenes of how we process. When somebody reaches out about an episode or makes a comment about the episode and they bring up the rapid fire questions, we know something very simple. They listened from the beginning of the episode to the end of the episode. And it gave us a marker of success. Did a person engage the whole way through? Now, if they don't bring it up, it doesn't mean that they didn't listen to the whole episode, but maybe they found something else that was interesting and that they wanted to share that. For us, one of the things that we learned is by having rapid fire questions at the end, we had more engagement. We had a way to measure the success of listenership through an episode. And there were a lot of good reasons to keep it at the end. So the micro experiment actually taught us what not to do. We had a good idea. The idea was that if people love it, why don't we put it at the front so that they don't have to wait till the end? We learned a lot of things about it, and what we learned was that it wasn't a great idea. And so we switched about a week ago back to the old format where we put the rapid fire questions at the end again. And we're seeing engagement rise, and we're seeing people comment about those rapid fire questions again. Lesson learned. That was a micro experiment. And the reason that it worked was it was low risk. It was a quick experiment we could run, and it gave us real data to get answers to the questions we had. In this case, we didn't like the results, so we switched it back. We run micro experiments all the time on the podcast. Different questions we ask, change up the rapid fire questions, different durations, different formats. We've tried about a year ago where our first segment, instead of being a conversation, was more documentary style where we pulled out our part and only left the guest part. We found that we didn't like that, so we moved it back to the original format, but we changed the format a little bit back in January about the flow of that. And we're really finding that we're liking that stride. So for us, that was a micro experiment, again, around the podcast that helped us choose how we innovate on the podcast to make it stronger. So Birch Beer example, the podcast example here, I'm going to give you one more example. One of our dreams here at the podcast is to not only have the audio format, the radio version, and the podcast, but to also have a video version for YouTube. Right now, our interviews are audio only on YouTube, which just doesn't convert as well. So a micro experiment that we're about to run is that we did an event in early June, and there's another one coming up July 22nd. It's called Podcast Row. Head on over to podcast-row.com. I'd love to see you there. You have to go apply to be a part of that, so you should go do that. And I'd love to interview you for the show right there. So we, in the beginning of June, did this micro experiment where we went and did that. And part of the event was that we were actually interviewing people on site at the event for our show. Not only did we record audio, but we recorded video. And what we're doing is we're working out a process in July where all of those episodes will be available in audio format on our audio channels and in video format on YouTube. And we want to see what the difference is between the audio conversion and the video conversion and what people like and don't like about both. This is a little bit bigger of a micro experiment because if it goes as well as we think it will, if we begin to see people engaged, we want to start doing all of our interviews in person, and we want to start doing video for all of the interviews. Super excited about that. There is a lot of risk in that. There's a lot of cost in doing it that way. There are a lot of steps that we have to take to get there. So this step removed the risk of having to buy all the equipment because the equipment was already there, and removed the risk of the time and energy to edit because we have an editor we're working with. It removed the time and energy of having to go out to every location because we did 10 interviews all in person in one day. So all of those things made it awesome for us to run this micro experiment. This is going to be a little bit longer because we recorded the episodes in June. We're waiting to get the files back. Once we have the files back, we'll run them in July and in August. And then we can look at the data. So here's a micro experiment that all set out. My time invested into this micro experiment might be 1 day or 2 days, depending on how you look at it. But then when we run the experiment, it will actually take 2 or 3 months to see the results of that experiment. So not as quick as I'd like with a micro experiment, but it's going to give us a lot of data back about what people like, don't like, and apply changes to the future for how we're going to move forward with this show. And if we're going to do video, how that looks and how we can make that possible. So that's another example of micro experiments that we're doing right here at JumbleThink. So, all right, talked about innovation versus inventing. I've talked about micro experiments and why we do it. I've given you some real stories from my own life from JumbleThink that you can hear. Now I want to leave you with a couple thoughts for your business. First off, I think there is a lot more to your dreams and ideas than you even realize there are. I think that there are probably areas, if you already have a business or if you're already an entrepreneur, that you could be innovating and dominating your market space. Whether it's a product, service, or message, you could own that space, and innovation is one of the places that you could get a leg up on your competition. You have to be intentional in this process. If you want to lead, you have to actually blaze a trail. And to do that, you can't do that by responding to everything that's happening around you. Trust me, I know. I'm dealing with a lot of things we have to respond to right now. But I'm also setting time aside so that I can focus on the future, for the vision, for the dreams and ideas that we have that we want to create in the direction that we're going. You can only lead from a place that you already are at. And so for your team, you need to be there. You need to be ahead, and you need to pull them towards you. You need to pull them into the future you want to create. So how do you do that? Your first step, as I mentioned, is to be intentional. You have to choose to do this. No one else is going to do it for you. No one else is going to help your business. No one else is going to help you flourish and reach your dreams and ideas when it comes to initiative. You have to have the initiative. Now, others will get on board if you are leading them in that direction. If you're excited about it, if you're moving forward, if you're innovating, if you're building those businesses, ideas, and dreams, they will come along for the ride and they will support you. But no one's going to support you until you are intentional to move forward. So step number 1, you have to be intentional. Step number 2, stop and see where you can innovate in your business. I talked about James Alcatraz. I talked about that concept of list of 10, and I love it. It's one of my favorite concepts around business. Stop. See what's going on. See where you can reflect. See how you can grow. See what's working and what isn't working in your business. Stop and see. That's step 2. Step 3, choose one area you can focus on. If you try to do everything at one time, nothing will do well. All of them will suffer. So what is that one area that you want to focus and grow in? Choose that area, focus on it, and then step number 4, run your micro experiment in that space. You got to do it. Do the work. Get involved. Plug in and run your experiment. Step 5, rinse and repeat. Just because you do it once doesn't mean that you're going to be an innovator in your space. You have to continue doing this. You have to continue to always be growing and evolving and changing as you do this. So rinse and repeat that micro experiment. Move on to the next. Once you've nailed the area you're trying to grow in, maybe it's time to step back and say, what's another area we can innovate in? Or where's another area we can grow? How can we make this process continue to go? So, step 1, be intentional. Step 2, stop and see where you can innovate in your business. Step 3, choose one area you can focus on innovation. Step 4, run your experiment. That's where you get into that dreamer's guide to micro experiments. Step 5, keep going. The final step of the micro experiment is rinse and repeat. You've got to do that. Rinse and repeat again and again and again and again. Innovation is a process. It is not an overnight hit. Sometimes it is, but for most people, it is not. It is a process that is long-term. So continue going. Keep on working at this. When it works, it works. When it doesn't, keep growing. Keep going. It's going to be okay. So how do you use micro experiments to innovate in your business? Well, I've just shared it. Now it's your turn. I would love to hear what's working for you, what isn't working, how you're stepping into micro experiments and using it as a tool for your business. Let me know. I'd love to hear your stories. If you find an area of micro experiments that you go, hey, Mike, I think I have a way that you could make micro experiments even better, let me know. Just because it's my concept doesn't mean it can't be innovated on itself. So let me know what's working, what isn't working for you. And I'd love to hear your stories of using micro experiments. We'd love to share it on this show. So reach out to me. Drop me a note, mike@jumblethink.com. Yes, that comes right to my inbox. I don't have a personal assistant answering my emails. It's me. So shoot me an email. Let's have that conversation. And I would love to hear how micro experiments are working for you. Next week on the show, we have 2 really awesome episodes lined up for you. July 2nd, we are talking about breaking through idea block. Yes, we all face idea block. Sometimes we get stuck. It's like writer's block. We all face it. We're going to be talking about it and how you can overcome it. Then on Friday's episode, super excited to have a friend of mine on from years ago from Northern California. It's going to be a surprise guest, so you're going to have to come back and check that out. But they are doing awesome things, but they are doing a lot to impact the world around us, so you're going to want to check out that episode. We also want to thank today's sponsors, Penji. They offer unlimited graphic design at a low monthly subscription. Head on over to Penji, PENJI.com. Use the code JUMBLE to get 15% off your first month. We also want to thank OpportunityInChina.com. They provide educational experiences whether you want to learn or teach abroad. OpportunityInChina.com. Go check them out. Well, that does it for today's episode. So now it's your turn to get out there, dream big, and change the world around you.
Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille Les enfants peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.